Who are you? What's your role? And who do you work for?
I'm Tim Miller, CEO and co-founder of Kusari. I work for Kusari.
Good job. What are three emerging Kubernetes tools that you're keeping an eye on?
There's a couple. So generally the tools that we like around Kubernetes are the tools that help you get into the ecosystem better as a dev. Co is one of the tools we really, really like. It really helps devs just get their code up and running in Kubernetes like no issues. So those are things we really love. Love a lot of the Sysdig tools, things like Falco. Those are really cool for understanding exactly what you're dealing with. That's kind of our thing. So that anything that helps with visibility in there is really, really great. And we also love a couple tools that we've been finding around the SBOM generation side, getting things more transparent into Kubernetes. A lot of the tools coming out of Google is really a couple exciting little ones, a couple like Excalibur. Obviously, they're pretty partial to things like Walk, but that's about it. Yeah. Dev tools are great.
Now, supply chain security, particularly on the topic of SBOM, one of our guests, Harsha, explained that container security doesn't stop at using minimal container images. Instead, one should look at the entire supply chain, dependencies, software composition analysis, software bill of materials, etc. What's your experience in securing the supply chain?
Yeah, so I mean, those two ideas are very complementary to each other. So the containers being minimal is an absolutely fantastic thing to do. I think everybody should be doing that. And however you're able to do it is great. But minimizing things have been a pattern for a long time. You don't want extra shells in your containers or things that can be, the bigger surface area, the more problems, and that's just no good, let alone things like efficiency and things like that. But yeah, that's definitely not the only problem you have, unless all you do is take container images and then run them. Still, past that, you still need to understand what your software is, where it came from, how it got there. And that's really where a lot of the problems that we've found really kind of pop up in the provenance of things. As the SDLC is really kind of designed to squish that information and get it out of there just so that software development becomes easier. So the deployments and things, packaging things up and removing that complexity is part of what a lot of these toolings are trying to do. But kind of frustratingly, that's the information that you need to go fix something when something comes up. So keeping things minimal, but also knowing and keeping track of things is really like, you have to do both of those things to really be effective, especially if you're dealing with more than just one project at a time, which I think basically everybody is.
On the subject of minimal container images and vulnerabilities, our guest, Harsha, debunked a myth that minimal container images are more secure because they have fewer binaries. He explained that the system calls made by the shell could be issued by another process and lead to an equal result. He suggested that minimal container images aren't enough. What's your view on this topic?
I think it's pretty similar to the previous question there. Yeah, so like I agree that minimal container images aren't enough, but part of what you're looking at is what those binaries in that container are actually doing, and are they necessary to perform the function or not. In general, something like a shell is almost never going to be in a minimal container image. You almost never need that. And so, yeah, you want to get rid of those unnecessary things that can elevate permissions on you. Just do extra stuff that you really don't need as part of the job of that container. So I totally agree that those should not be in there. But past that, yeah, again, I think it really goes back to make sure the things that are going into that container are exactly what you intend to complement the job that you're intending to do. Separately, I'd ask, how do you actually know that the container images are in fact minimal? And that goes back to that transparency and understanding question. So you really, again, kind of have to keep your eye on both the transparency, the collection of things, and the minimalization of things. It's all kind of part and parcel of doing this well.
Secret scanning and security. Yakir and Asaf, two of our guests, emphasized using multiple secret scanning tools to identify different vulnerabilities. They highlighted that each tool uses distinct methods. Some are regex-based, while others are entropy-based, yielding varied results. What's your advice when it comes to securing and scanning for threats?
Is that it's pretty hard, and that you should probably use all those things. Generally, though, what we found is the tooling around finding secrets in your repositories is less important than making sure that you have the right processes in place to prevent them from getting there in the first place. And so things like SALSA attestations, verifying that you've got the right permissions, that the developers don't have access to put in secrets, that if they do leak a secret, that it's short-lived, it's single-use, and that it's not some generic open door password to your like whole AWS account. I'm sure a few people have PTSD from that. That's how I got my hair. But that is the general way that you should approach that problem. I think the tooling and finding the secrets I would just double dip that with any approach that you can take, but really focus on the process, that like how'd they get there in the first place. That's the bigger issue, I think.
Someone that I was speaking to earlier was talking a lot about automation. It was saying that security falls short when it comes to automation. I know that might sound a little bit general. What's your take on that, though?
Yeah, I think so. I think, well, the automation, I think the way that folks deal with security automation is kind of funny. Like a lot of time you imagine that security is like stopping you from doing something. And so when they say security falls short of automation, I think generally what they mean is it's not enabling you to move faster. It's like putting up gates so that bad things don't happen. Kind of like what I was just saying. So like you don't want secrets ending up in your repository, things like that. So I think generally a lot of the tools in the security space are to put up walls. Your ability to react is probably your biggest security tool, though. And enabling folks to move quickly is really, I think, an significantly undervalued security perspective. So I would generally agree with it.
When it comes to Kubernetes, what's your least favorite security feature?
Well, generally being open by default is not awesome. So like the amount of effort that it takes to really make a Kubernetes cluster usable for a real environment, I think is the biggest problem. On the flip side, that's also what makes it so easy for a lot of folks to get started with, is because everything just kind of works. In reality, that's never a good model to start with. A lot of tools are in the ecosystem to help get that fixed, though, and so you see a lot of momentum fixing that for folks with paid solutions. But yeah, I think so a little bit more granular access would be really well appreciated by everybody.
For any developer that's out there, is going to be working with Kubernetes, what's like the one piece of advice that they simply cannot do without?
Infrastructure is really hard. I would really look for tools. There's a lot of tooling in the space, and there's a whole lot of information that you can use to get started. I would not jump right into being a Kubernetes administrator. I'd really start, if you're a developer, like looking for how to get your application into the Kubernetes cluster first and foremost, and then moving yourself up the stack from there. I think a lot of folks fall into trying to understand every little bit and byte about Kubernetes under the hood, like how to deal with access controls and how to make sure that the scaling policies work properly. I would just get the basics around deployments going first, make sure that you understand the models there, and then again, keep it small. Kubernetes is designed to take something and scale it and blow it up and make it easier for you to blow it up. So don't put in huge things, make those steps pretty small. But yeah, start on the dev side, not the admin side. I think that's been the biggest overwhelming factor we see with new frazzled Kubernetes users.
Kubernetes turned 10 years old this year. What should we expect in the next 10 years to come?
Again, I think a lot of these themes are going to hopefully be pretty true. I hope to see a lot more automation around enterprise-friendly Kubernetes in particular, without being crazy expensive. I think that's been a bit of a barrier to entry. You see things like OpenShift, which no real people can afford, only and so things like that are just too much money. And I think you see, like for smaller companies, the ability to take something like that and get approached, maybe without all the bells and whistles that something like that brings, but just something more approachable than true vanilla, I think would be great. And I'm certain that we're going to see a lot more of that. And then in addition, I expect to see a lot more, again, of that dev cycle and how do you get into there. I expect to see things like Flux take off and things like that to help really get around the CI/CD aspect and getting into Kubernetes much easier.
Particularly on Flux, and also a minor shout out to Andy. Thinking about GitOps, security, where do these two things come together? Can you tell me about the security aspects of Flux?
Yeah, so I think just the general model is how I would think about it. So the fewer opportunities you have as a human to affect the process and how you get something from A to B, the more automation you have to do to validate that and make sure that everything is working ahead of time. And so if you're investing in your automation and your workflow, it's going to be far more repeatable. That's also going to be easier for people to come on board. And so I think that's really that model is why folks do this, is that you don't want to have to teach every single person who comes onto your company every single little weird thing that you have to do to get your thing from A to B. Tools like Flux and the general GitOps model are beautiful in that way. It does require more upfront investment in the workflow, but I think that's a very worthwhile investment for basically everybody.
What's next for you in Kusari?
So next for us in Kusari is really getting our SaaS platform off the ground. We just started our go-to-market a few months ago. We've been working on open source Guac for a couple of years now, and after listening to what everybody's been saying for so long about what they love about Guac, what they hate about Guac, we've really put that into a product, and are now really getting that out there, listening to what people have to say about that, and iterating until we don't work anymore.
How can people get in touch with you?
Bunch of ways. Kusari.dev is a great way to find us. We're on LinkedIn. There's the OpenSSF Slack as well. You can find us at, but generally Kusari.dev, you'll find us there. Picture of my daughter on my shoulders.